Hey, Dom, do you remember the first thing you learned about stacking a lineup?
What do you mean, Jenna?
Well, like when deciding what news is going to go first, like what's the universal saying about the top story?
Oh, you mean that one about if it bleeds, it leads.
Yes, it's like the original clickbait.
Yeah, yeah. Why is that?
I don't honestly, I don't know, but it was a rule that I learned, and more importantly, it was a rule that I learned to never question.
Yeah, I remember that too. It's like something we should talk more about.
Yeah, well, with that, let's start the show. Hi, I'm Jenna.
And I'm Dom. You know what's funny? Not long ago, we were both breaking news. Now we're
Breaking unemployment records.
exactly just like thousands of other journalists who've been laid off from newsrooms across the country.
Yeah, and after the shock wore off, we kept asking ourselves, what the hell do we do now?
And over many, many cups of coffee,
And maybe a few drinks.
we realized we had a unique opportunity here. Why not pull back the curtain on what's really happening in American media?
Right? I mean, we've spent years in this industry seeing how stories get made or don't, and now we can actually talk about it.
And trust me, there's a lot to talk about. From local news disappearing to social media reshaping journalism, we'll break it all down.
And look, we're not here to lecture anybody. We just want to help make sense of the information that we're getting and maybe have some much needed fun along the way.
So whether you're glued to the news, just trying to figure out what's real in your feed, or curious about the future of media, come hang with us.
Welcome to Laid Off and Looking, a podcast where two journalists
Are taking a critical look at American media.
Okay, so once upon a time, long before there was broadcast, I know, broadcast anything in the gay 90s of the 1800s.
Oh, you could say so. They like the 1890s. Okay.
Yeah, exactly. The gay 90s. It's for dramatic effect. Just work with me here. Anyway, but when there was the first real big American media war, it was between William Randolph Hearst and Joseph Pulitzer, and that was during the Spanish-American War. So Hearst newspapers, especially the New York Journal, because we know how messy New York papers love to be, got
Mm-hmm.
famous for their sensationalistic yellow journalism, quote unquote yellow journalism, or reporting that's really much more sensational or crude exaggerations or using unverified claims and partisan agendas. And tell me when this starts to feel familiar.
Well, good thing that doesn't happen anymore, Jenna, right?
Yeah, totally, right? Like, thank God we left that in the past. So anyway, so once Hearst realizes that showcasing horrific incidents sells papers, he coins the phrase, if it bleeds, it leads.
Oh, so that's okay. And yeah, and we've been using it ever since.
Yeah, exactly. But at the same time, a great poet once said, I believe a poet out of Jamaica once said, you can fool some people sometimes, but you can't fool all the people all the time. And so over time, as people get hip to the fact that, frankly, Hearst is kind of playing in their faces to sell papers
Hmm.
with, false promises of trustworthy information, they start demanding more. Again, this is starting to ring familiar. So papers
Hmm.
like the New York Times shift their focus to more factual and credible reporting and using slogans like all the news that's fit to print as a way to prove their credibility bona fides.
Yeah, that practice still lives on though, right? I mean, we don't call it yellow journalism anymore, but everything you described is everything most people say they hate about the media now.
Right? That's wild.
That's true.
But yeah, no, it's literally everything that people say they hate about us.
So there's this lasting effect of yellow journalism on people's minds, right? I mean, doing news that way seems like something that would affect our nervous system or something.
Okay, so here's the fascinating part. So, as I was researching yellow journalism, I came across this 2008 paper in
Hmm.
psychoanalysis and psychotherapy. Like, I was
Hmm.
deep in the rabbit hole.
Oh, you were really going. I'm loving this. Go ahead.
Okay, so the
Tell more.
paper finds that the cumulative exposure of traumatic events, like, what's reported in fear-based news, the whole if it bleeds, it leads thing, it becomes the subconscious lens through which people start to view the world. And so seeing excessive amounts of death and violence, inherently,
Hmm.
it creates almost like a rift in your capacity for empathy. And people begin to look at society as inherently bad and a place where optimism might seem stupid or silly, and they prefer fatalistic thinking because they're getting fed this all the time.
No shit. Seriously.
Yeah, that was 2008. That was 2008, where a
Uh-huh.
researcher was like, "Guys, maybe you." Oh, I'll sit down. Okay, fine. So, so yeah, that's what I really wanted us to unpack. Like for everyone who insists that the media won't cover this, um, who's actually stacking the lineup of the news?
Everything that you kind of see in the newscast is really carefully chosen by the assignment desk editor. And those decisions can make the newscast.
Yeah, exactly. They can make it or they can break it.
Hmm.
Ever wonder how the stories in the news get chosen? Inside of every newsroom, the assignment desk is the place where those calls get made about what leads and what even counts as news. Those decisions reveal what newsrooms think about what the public cares about, how business pressures can shape coverage, and how technology and social platforms are changing the way that people get informed in the first place. So that's why we wanted to talk with Professor Benjamin Davis. He's an award winning journalist, chair of multimedia journalism at Morgan State University, and a veteran of ABC News, MSNBCnews.com, excuse me, and NPR. Close to my heart. So, Professor Davis or Ben, whichever one you're more comfortable with, but thank you so much for joining us.
Then it's just fine. Thank you.
So first, I wanted to start with because while we do talk with our audience includes people who, of course, have worked in the industry, there are people who haven't. And so for anyone who might not really understand what the chain of command is in a newsroom and where the assignment desk, because it doesn't sound like a lofty title, but where does
Yeah.
that fall and what does it do?
It's a great place to work, whether you're at a network in New York, like I was with ABC, or if you're doing it on the local level, as I did in Philadelphia. It's basically the central nervous system of a newsroom, and the assignment desk and the assignment editors. They can be in contact with a photographer in the field or the president of the corporation. They have that type of access depending on the type of news that is passing their way. And it's a nonstop position. It's a easy burnout position as well, because you have to keep track of multiple things and you don't want to drop the ball. If the ball is dropped by the assignment desk, well, then the company looks bad, the reporter looks bad, and making a reporter look bad is a fatal sin.
Hmm. And so when you were on the news desk, what were the real world factors that were going into how you were deciding? And I also want to say, again, if we start using lingo, this is one of the things, the rundown. That is, of course, the list of stories, how they get
Right?
stacked and what's going to run where. So what were the real world factors that you were considering?
Making sure that I was getting the information in for the executives, executive producers for the shows that they wanted. So you pretty much have to anticipate how let's say an evening news network producer thinks and what type of stories he or she likes. You watch out for those stories, and you bring them in and you prepare to tell them about what's happening. You give them the five W's of that story. Sometimes the stories you think that they like, they aren't interested in for a particular week. Other times they'll say, "What did you have anything more on a particular story?" So you have to sort of anticipate what the what the company likes and what the executive producer likes as well. And are you going to keep getting more of that? Sometimes those stories are dying on the vine, and then you have to also say, well, this story, it really doesn't have any more legs. We thought that probably we should avoid it, but that's not always your call. What we do is we bring the food to the table. We do sometimes select what food comes to the table, but we don't always decide who's going to eat what.
I just wanted to interject again with like more insider newsroom jargon. Whether or not a story has legs is something that often gets thrown out there. Like, is there
I'm sorry.
yeah, more to the date
Yeah.
of? And
Right.
frequently, what would happen, at least in my newsroom, is people like, "Oh my God, that story's got thighs."
Yeah, those are running thighs.
Exactly.
It's like basically So you're in my neighborhood today, covering the mass shooting and getting the crying parents and all of those things that go with a sad story. Will you be here next week? Well, if we're going to be there next week, that means that story has legs. It will walk into next week. But what most people feel is that we know you're not going to be here next week. You'll be on to another
Hmm.
story. So that story wouldn't have legs in that case.
And for me, it was having worked in cable news, it was always interesting. You have a morning call where everybody be on there hearing what's the update for like what's the rundown, what's happening for the day. Kind of like
Mhm.
marching orders of kind of giving a sense of what it is that the network, at least in broadcast, is covering for the day. Um, I'm just so curious, when you first joined, what did you think you were going to be doing? Like when you're first joining the desk? Because I think, I had a different perception of this as years passed away, like that I haven't done that in a long time. Like I see it very differently now. How did you think when you first started working at the desk? What did you think in terms of the stories you were choosing versus looking back how news handles it today, how they handle the assignment desk today?
I was idealistic, things that
I
I thought
think
were
we all
important to
are.
Hmm.
me. uh, they weren't. There was one story. I mean, well, just I'll talk about the idealism. The guy that there was a baseball player who was the first one to do a high five, and I just saw, and he passed. He died, and I thought that was a big deal at the net. Well, for me, it was. I said we got to at least mention that this guy died and what he started. And so I pushed it forward, and no one wanted to carry it. They didn't think it was important. It wasn't because he was an African American that I thought it was important. It was because he started a trend in sports that caught on and is still going on to this day. So I was idealistic in that respect. Sometimes there are stories that you think that you know are important, but they aren't necessarily rating getters. They aren't going to get the attention of the executive producers who have a sense of what their shows should look like. And you don't want to get the reputation of, oh, this is another Ben story that Ben loves, but we really can't use.
Hmm.
So there was a lot of that as part of a learning curve, and you get used to it. You start to know what they expected, and you give it to them. Sometimes you just have to convince them, try to convince them, and sometimes you win, sometimes you lose. There was a musician named Sun Ra,
Mm.
and I remember when Sun Ra died, and I went to Mort Dean at ABC. I won't get into many names, you guys, but I went to Mort Dean at ABC in the morning show, and Mort didn't know who Sun Ra was. I said, "Well, let me tell you who Sun Ra is, and let me, listen to a little of his music." And lo and behold, when the show was on, Sun Ra died today. And I'm like, gosh, Mort did it. He's so cool. It just depends, it depends sometimes on how you go about trying to convince them that a story is important. In this case, Sun Ra, not only was he cool and he looked cool, but the music is something that they could relate to at the end of the day.
Yeah, yeah.
And I think there's a difference too about when we're talking about national networks that what they cover versus local, because national really is always looking for like sometimes the top, what would you say, like top five stories, and you kind of get fed the same story from all the networks, which to me is a bit of a you lose something. I really do think. I feel like we've gotten to this pattern of that's all you keep seeing the same stories
Yeah.
over and over again that people get, you do kind of just after a while, you're like, I've had enough. Like I keep hearing the same news. And that's why people sometimes think, I got to detox from the news a little bit because they're just watching the same thing with no new information really.
The average viewer can start predicting what your show is going to look like before they see it. Well, then you know you don't have a good journalism program. And so basically, everybody knows that if there's a big storm coming up the Northeast, it's going to be within the first 10 minutes if it's not going to be, if it's not going to lead the show. Because the networks know that everybody likes to stay up to speed on the weather. It goes across all demographics. It's a safe one. And the children as well, and sex. But
Mm.
in politics, and God knows if you mix all three of those together, whether it be pedophiles,
I'm not. It's not funny, but good
pretty much
Lord.
you can pretty much predict what's going to be in the show. And the networks, I would say the national networks, the traditional networks, they've keyed into these automatics, if you will. They're trending. online, and they also are things that will help with their ratings. And that predictability, everyone's doing the same thing at all of the networks. They may decide, well, one will be 2 minutes in the show, and the other may say we'll lead, and the other 5 minutes in the show, but they will all put it in there. So I, as a viewer, pretty much will know what the show is going to look like, and there's going to be some weather thrown in there. That's for darn
Some
sure.
weather, just
Yeah,
FYI.
there will be weather. What is not in the show though is what
Hmm.
people are missing.
Hmm.
That the things that you can't predict, but you know are out there, and people are looking for those things, but they aren't in there. If they aren't trending, if it's an everyday people type of story, if it's not trending, it's not going to make it unless there's an excellent reporter, excellent producer with a little push who will say, I have an interesting story you guys should try. Otherwise, everyday stories are not going to make it on the network level for the most part.
All right.
That's simple.
I just want to clarify why I cracked up laughing about this sex and politics because one of the first stories, to date myself, I was in college during the Monica Lewinsky scandal.
Uh,
And as that was one of the big things that we were talking about in all of my journalism classes, is how that story was getting covered, what was being focused on, what wasn't, etc. But
yeah.
obviously, we've since from there.
Yeah, I teach that. That's part of the basics of journalism. When you're doing local news, I try to explain to students, okay, look, there are certain things. I said, there's children, sex, politics, and animals. Any story around those, a puppy caught in a drain, a child that's lost, uh, politics, especially if it involves sex or sex alone. Those stories pretty much people will stop and listen to for the most part. And then all the other things, Ben, that you bring to the table, Ben, we know you worked at NPR, Ben, but this not necessarily what we want to do today.
Well, that's really interesting, and I do want to circle back to that subtle, or maybe it's not subtle, because I've spent most of my career in public media, but that difference between the type of journalism that public media does and commercial media does. But before we get to that, one of the things that really, really sticks in my craw that I wanted to reach out to you to discuss was how do you address this sentiment that a lot of people in the public have is that the media won't talk about this or the media won't cover this when it comes to certain stories? Because from my perspective, that's not necessarily true. I usually follow up with, well, what kind of media are you consuming in the first place to
Right.
think that? But how, as you, as someone who has been a decider of what's going in the rundown, what's going to be news of the day, how do you address that sentiment that so many people have?
Well, the media has to look out for its own interests first. It's a media business. It's a journalism business. So that is first and foremost. What type of stories are you going to talk about, do that will help feed the beast, that will help feed the shareholders? Plain and simple. And sometimes the stories that you think are important, they're not going to make the grade. And that happens a lot. That happens a lot. But it also depends on where a person's going to get their information from. I mean, viewers now have to, or users, I should say, you have to educate yourself about the information you're going to consume. Which news organizations are you going to get your information from? Because not everybody is going to satisfy you. It's highly unlikely that there will be one source that's going to satisfy all of your news and information needs. Things that they won't talk about. Well, we may not talk about things that you're interested in. That's just because we're corporate and we have other interests. I should say they have other interests. And maybe what you want to be talked about is not going to feed those interests. Yes, it's a very great story what's happening in your neighborhood, and it involves the entire 10-mile radius where you live. But beyond that, the story doesn't have legs. It doesn't carry on, so to speak. And so a big network takes those type of things into consideration. The exception would be as if something happens within your 10-mile radius that everyone can relate to. Well, then it'll
Mm,
start getting consideration. But for the most part, things that we think are important in our area, they aren't that important in places like New York City or Los Angeles for that matter. They just don't feel unless it's a universal type of situation. Excuse
okay.
me.
No, that's fine. I was going to say shout out to nonprofit local because
Yeah,
those stories, that's usually where you're going to find them.
that's where you're going to find it. And in my opinion, and I have to, as a matter of disclosure, I am working on about to unveil an app that deal. My throat's drying up. Excuse me.
Oh, that's quite all
Okay.
right.
Um, that is for citizen journalists because I believe that the future of journalism lies in the hands of people who are holding smartphones and are in the proximity to news or have the ability to produce news themselves. And they know that media companies are in need of content, especially local media companies, and online publishers are in need of content. And they're cutting back on their staffs. They don't always have enough money to have a full staff. So they're able to get content from these citizen journalists who are out there. And the other side of that equation is that the citizen journalists should be able to sell their content as well. So I believe that the future of journalism, well, part of the future of journalism, will be citizen journalists who understand the generally accepted rules of uh, good journalism production skills, and then provide that content to local media companies who would otherwise not be able to get to a certain story. And the perfect example of that is the George Floyd situation. That story
Mm.
was Darnella Frazier shot the video, and it wasn't until 2 days later that the local media companies even knew about that. But if she were in a citizen journalism mode, she would have said, wait a minute, I should also interview the guy that was standing next to me. And maybe I should go over there and get the guy in the store, get a soundbite from him, and put all those together in the story. And then you know what? I can sell it to all of these media companies and make a little money. In her case, she would have made a whole bunch of money. But that should be the future, part of the future of journalism, the ability of people who are holding smartphones where the technology is. That's what journalism needs to go. It needs to follow the technology and not whine and complain about Chat GPT and AI and big companies cutting back on hiring. Follow the technology. How can you apply that technology to the betterment of journalism?
Ben, sorry, what kind of skills or guardrails do you think um, we could, if we're talking about citizen journalists, what kind of guardrails do we put in terms of making sure that they're doing the journalism that they're doing responsibly? Like,
Mm,
how do we make sure that, because obviously it isn't just asking any question. Like, there is a skill set to being a
yeah.
journalist, ethics, all these things that go along with it. How do we make sure, though, that the people who are able to use this citizen are able to sort of implement the skill sets that we journalists who've been working there for a number of years that we've learned?
Dominic, you want to know the fun part of that?
Yeah,
No matter what guardrails you put up, there will be
it's
some
gonna.
citizens that will figure out how
Yeah,
to climb over them.
very
That
true.
that 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 is a given. The best you can do is, in the case again, I don't want to push my app, but I'm telling you,
No,
the app
This
is.
is the
But,
place.
but what you
yeah.
do is we train them, and then we give them levels of expertise. We train them on, and it's not an hour training session. We have to keep the training to about 10 minutes. You watch a video. It tells you the basic rules, ethics of journalism, how to behave around cops, um, what type of questions are inappropriate around children. Children should not be interviewed. Basic rules that journalists follow all the time. And then they're tested on those. And then you're tested on your ability to shoot video. And that's the only guardrail that a citizen journalism app can really put forth, other than being
Mhm.
out there in the field. And the people that want to look at their video or purchase their video, they will see that, oh, this citizen journalist didn't do score very well, and they have been labeled a producer. And this one has been labeled a MMJ, and this one has been labeled a reporter, and that one a correspondent. Well, anyone that's labeled a reporter or correspondent, pretty much they scored 100 or they did very well on the journalism test. But I have one media company tell me that we know there's going to be some very crappy video, but it may be the crappy video that we need. So everything's not going to be exactly professional. So it's a mixture of good and bad. The ethics part, though, the ethics, at least what the attitude that we're taking is that
Hmm.
if there's one ethical violation, we're going to one that's blatant. We're
Hmm.
we trained against. You're not going to come back into the app again. You're gone forever. But it we want to tell people that there are ethics that journalists follow, and because we believe that the motto is to seek the truth, to attain the truth, to reveal the truth. That's the role of journalism as I define it.
Hmm.
And we want people that understand that. They may not understand it coming in, but at the end of the day, it's all about trying to get some truth that you think is important, whether it be a local festival, a local PTA meeting, high school sports,
Hmm.
anything, whatever that truth is that you want to get out to the public, you think is important, well, you should be able to do that. You don't have to just sit around and complain. Get it out and see who likes it. Now, your news station in your locale may not like it, but a station 300 miles away, 1,000 miles away, 5,000 miles away overseas, they may like it. So everyone should get a shot at getting their story out the best way they can. And we try to train them to how to do that story.
I think
So
that's great. Oh, go ahead, Jenna.
yeah, I was gonna say, don't complain, do something. It shouldn't be
That's right.
radical,
Do
but
something. That's right. And we are going to prepare ourselves for probably a new type of approach to journalism in terms of how people are going to put their stories together and what they think is important. And we are putting a limit on the stories. They can't be more than 2 minutes. But we think that people are going to, in our testing, we've already found some stories that people have thought were interesting. And I'm thinking, what's interesting about watching two teenagers watch lifeguards and what the lifeguards are doing? But that's a story that someone has figured out a narration that they think is important. And there's room for all of that. But we journalists. It's not just the New York Times. It's not just
Yeah.
CBS News. It's not just CNN.
hmm
Journalism is is an umbrella, and I wish people could think about it that way and remember that it's an umbrella under which falls any thing that can get First Amendment protection. So if you're a sports reporter, entertainment reporter, gossiping, if you will, any type of information that goes out that ultimately could get First Amendment protection, just like a New York Times reporter would get. All of those fall under the umbrella of journalism, and that could be an individual that decides they're going to do a story that they consider journalism. So we can't just say that journalism is just this high and lofty thing that only happens on the Upper West Side of New York City.
That's exactly, that's so important because I feel like so many stories end up not getting told. And you were just saying, like, what you might not find interesting, let's say in one story about the lifeguard,
Mm.
there could be a whole other generation of people who are like, oh my God, I love that story. And
Yeah,
I think that's the beauty of it all. Cause I think like like, we can all think like, oh, if the New York Times covers it, it's real news. And that isn't the case. That we
right.
as people are all journalists. We all have the ability of being storytellers.
Oh, we all are. We do, and they should be. And we find people that are a little reluctant because they say, "Well, I don't write well, and my grammar is poor, or I don't know how to hold a camera right." Well, we try to
Hmm.
address those things, but that's also where you follow the technology once again. You have AI technology that will help you with your grammar, help you write a story, help you edit a story. And that's the type of app that this is. And we expect to grow more into that as time goes on. But you guys know there are great stories out there.
of
There are wonderful stories,
course.
and everyone should get a shot at it.
Well, is this because I'm also wondering, we're in this wonderful time now where more and more journalists are getting laid off and finding themselves freelancing.
Yeah.
So is this the type of thing that like a seasoned journalist, not a new person, but
Oh
someone
yeah.
who's been at it for
Yeah.
years, but I still feel called to do this work, should or could engage in and still get something out of it to find a different avenue?
I've already told one former journalist, professional journalist, who's now a freelancer. They're looking forward to the launch because you can actually, if you find your niche. Let's say you want to do only feature stories on festivals. Let's say that, for example. You can do feature stories on festivals, and if they're evergreen, you can sell it to multiple stations across the country. For instance, you say this person wanted to sell her story for $200. I said, okay, that's fine. I said, but you realize that if the station in Kansas City likes it and New Orleans likes it and three other stations like it because it's a feature and it's evergreen, multiply that times 200. So we want freelancers to start thinking that they can do stories that they think are important that others may like as well. And local stations, which are and not just TV stations, we're talking about online publishers as well,
Mm-hmm.
for content, are willing to pay $200 for that. And as a matter of fact, they can regulate their prices. You can charge more, you can charge less, or you can give it away. We also encourage them to give it away if they want to as well. But no, this would be a great opportunity for freelancers from the business perspective. We want it just to be something that freelancers can use robustly, but we also want people in general, the masses in the US and overseas, countries like India, Ghana is going to be one of the first countries that we go into once we launch internationally. The reason because
Wow.
Ghana, they have plenty of media, plenty of radio stations and TV, but they tend to be owned by a political interest. So
Mm.
I was at the Ghana Institute of Journalism, and I saw how well they train their students there, just very serious students. I was thinking, wow, I'll take one of these. I'll take three. I'll take four of those the students back with me. But once they graduate, and they go into media, they're told to follow certain political rules, ideology rules, as opposed to the simple rules of journalism. What is the truth? Go ahead and pursue that. So I want them to use apps like this one to tell their own story. Extra of these media companies that try to hire them tell their own story and hopefully figure out a way to make a living off of it.
Ben,
Well,
it's, oh, sorry, go
sorry,
ahead.
I just had one follow-up for this.
Yeah.
And when I hear a great idea like this, my first thought is also, well, as producers used to ask me, what's the pushback? And for this app, I'm wondering, is this something that would be threatening to the people who have been the traditional gatekeepers, who
Yeah.
were the deciders, who were the people who like, no, this does not, or this does? And secondly, what about the issue of exclusivity? So many stations want, well, we have the story, but only we have it. What do you mean
Mhm.
you're selling it to like three or four other people? That's
Right.
not cool.
Well, that's what the technology dictates. And journalism has to adjust to the technology. The
Are
technology
you
said that
suggesting the gatekeepers have to change some things?
well, the gate has already broken.
Mhm.
They're standing there. They think they're watching a gate, and they have to turn around and realize that gate's not there anymore. Once the internet and digital and now AI, there are new rules in place, and what are those rules? No one knows what they are. They're being defined by the day, and then redefined the next day. So yeah, there the information is going to flow. And what the citizen journalist has to do is figure out how they're going to take care of themselves in terms of their stories and their interests and their charges. One thing that we require that they have their name will be burned into their video no matter where it goes.
Mm.
So their name, once you put your name in there, it can go to three, four, five stations. For instance, Darnella Frazier again, who shot the George Floyd video. Whenever we still see this George Floyd video, we should see her name every time. And they media companies just have to get used to it. And what the rules will be, um, we don't know. And anyone that says that they do, they really don't. But there's really no control. And the only control that they could have, and we have to be prepared for this, and other citizen journalism apps have to be prepared for it, is that a company will come along, a big company will come along and say, uh, so you want to retire early, huh, Ben? Okay, this is how you're going to retire early. We're going to offer you X multi-millions of dollars for your company, and they will put it under their umbrella. And that probably will happen in some cases once it becomes a threat, or if it becomes an enhancer to a big company's bottom line.
Hmm.
You know, Ben, earlier you mentioned you were talking about Ghana and also like political interests of certain of journalism. Like when I work having worked in cable news at a certain period of time, you
Mhm.
know, it's interesting because you really do have like all of them have their own voice, right? They all kind of have the audience they're speaking to, and it always fascinated me that it kind of like it mis- listen, I worked for Fox News at a certain period earlier in the early 2000s, and it was so interesting to me. Like you had so many, like everything was about a perspective,
Yeah,
one point of view. Flash forward years later, and I ended up working for PBS local here with Jenna, and I just sort of was able to cover whatever story I wanted. When I worked at Fox, we
yeah,
did have a certain here's your stories for the
yeah,
day, and this is what you're covering. At PBS, I was like, it was so unusual to have all of this open to me. Like what's happening locally, it could be a national story if it's something because it does affect us here in our communities.
right,
And also we could discuss stories that aren't
yeah,
and maybe weren't going to get the ratings or the clicks.
right,
I think the concern that I have sometimes now is the fact that everything is so ratings and clickbaited, right? Everything is all about the views. That what happens to the stories where people are just that it's out there? Because sometimes a story doesn't hit until a story could blow up later on. Also,
yeah.
it could sort of catch on depending on the story you're talking about. Is there a concern of like we're missing out on certain important moments in this? Just if looking at our country right
Yeah.
now,
Well,
where we could be missing out on big moments.
well, definitely, we are to make some extent. There are corporations that do address that need for the interesting story, but they don't have the ratings pressure. The one that I think of is Spectrum News One.
Hmm.
They don't depend on ratings because they're local regional cable service. They depend on subscribers overall, so they don't have the daily ratings pressure that broadcasters do. And so they do a lot of curiosity stories. They do a lot of stories that they think are or more interesting that you won't find on other parts of the city or across the country. And their techniques, as a result, they have different techniques in terms of how they're going to shoot a story. And that's actually catching on, if you ask me. I think that when I was at NPR, it was chaos turned into organization. You would have all of these chaotic ideas coming in terms of what is news, and it's organized eventually and put on the air depending on how interesting it was. And does your skill set match that interest? In other words, I have a great story about, how can I say this? The Gullah people of South Carolina, one of my favorites.
Okay.
Gullah people of South Carolina and what they mean to the region and what their culture actually means to African Americans. And I'm like, yeah, okay, all right. But the person that's offering that story, do they write well? Are they able to get together with
Hmm.
someone that can speak the production side of it well? Do they research it well? And you put it to a curious audience, and that's public radio, that's public TV. It's okay. You present the good idea with in a disciplined fashion with people who have skills. That works. The same story. Do I if I go to major commercial network? Okay, all right, forget it. It's not gonna work. Unless I can do it in a minute 30 and it's an
Hmm.
anniversary in February during Black History Month. Otherwise,
Okay.
Yes.
you know, it's that's those type of things are not at the top of the list. And there are some corporations, media companies that want their theme to be universal. So they put out memos daily and to the executives down, and the executives go down to the next level, and the next level gets it. And sometimes that bottom level is assignment desk. So they already know what theme or things they're looking for. Um, I worked in a place like that, and I enjoyed working in the place, by the way, but I didn't always like their themes. And I would purposely go against the themes, knowing my ideas are gonna get rejected. I'm thinking like, this is you guys, this is my way of letting you know that I'm here. Okay.
I've
I know
pitched
you're not
many
gonna
a
take my
story like
story.
that.
Yeah. I know you're not gonna take my story, but this is a thought process. People think this way. I just want to go on the record for it. Um, this, it sometimes um, they need your immediate input when they're walking down the wrong street, and you're the only person in the newsroom that knows it. Um, the Oklahoma City bombing. Um, I remember I was at ABC News at the time, and there's a journalist, former journalist, the late Peter Jennings, someone that I admired greatly. I mean, he's the type of journalist that I wanted to be like. And someone whispered in Peter's ear that there's a suspicion that the Nation of Islam was behind the bombing. And I'm like, Lord have mercy.
Oh
The way
my.
you would say it is, Lord have mercy, these white people. That's the way he
Okay, that is another conversation much deeper.
would.
There's not a black journalist in America that has not thought that.
Yeah, right. And you say, oh my goodness, they're like Nation of Islam doesn't do those type of things. So how do I tell a man that makes I don't multi-millions of dollars and he's in charge and he can squish me with a wink of an eye? How do I tell him or his assistant that you guys, it's not the Nation of Islam. I'll bet my next paycheck on that. But you have to be there for those types of things. Sometimes you have to give the input, and that's everyday input. That's street level input that they're missing sometimes because of the people that they hang out with, the people that they golf
Mm-hmm.
with, the receptions that they go to. They still have all of this influence in front of them every day when they go to work, and that influence doesn't always bring in information from areas that they have no contact with.
Mm-hmm.
So I am not saying anything bad about Peter.
Mm-hmm.
Don't get me wrong here. Whoever whispered that in Peter's ear, I don't know who that person was, but that's a biggie that sticks with me, and I'm just like, gosh, these guys. How could you think that if you know the Nation of Islam, you know what? There's some very serious people, and the fruit of Islam is some very serious dudes, but they are more defensive than anything else.
Hmm. Yeah, that literally, there's so many stories that black journalists could
It goes
tell.
on and on.
I can't even. Um, but going back to the citizen journalism app, one of the things that came to mind was is two questions actually. One, is there any way that the app handles something like insurance? Because we
Mhm,
know that there are some very litigious people in this country who are
mhm.
quick to be like, I didn't like what you said, and so now I'm going to sue you. And there
Right,
have been instances where freelance journalists have been sued, and
right.
the publication that they published with was like, yeah, you're on your own.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
is that something that's going to get addressed?
They will be educated about copyright rules, all of the problems they could face with copyright infringements. They'll be told all of that. It'll be made quite clear to them. Uh, the app itself is going to have to find itself in a position of being basically a pipeline
Hmm.
that we can it's the cover that Facebook uses and everybody else uses, Instagram uses, which is we are a pipeline and we're not originating the ideas. Is we're contributing to the marketplace of ideas as once defined by the Supreme Court. The ideas need to get out there. They do have to be responsible. They still have to be fall within those Sullivan rules of protection of something that's malicious content and reporting something that's wrong knowingly.
Mm,
Those are things will get you in trouble. Those type of things you'll be trained about briefly. It's not like we're going to grill you on them every time you come into the app, but we will tell you about them, what those simple rules are. But that's how they're going to best protect themselves. The best protection for any journalist is the truth. That's it. And people have to understand once you come in, you want to present something. If you're lying, especially if you're a citizen journalist, if you're lying or if you're fudging, your neighbor's going to know. And you're going to see your neighbor at the ballpark or you're going to see them at the grocery market. And they're going to jam you up before any lawyer does. And are they going to look at your stories again? Are you going to be able to sell your stories again? Will a local TV station want to even, or publication want to put your stories up again? Because they got so many complaints about your not telling the truth. And also, is that why you're labeled at the bottom of the ranking as opposed to the top? you want to sort of, I mean, we're a gamified type of nation. You want to be able to game your way to being at the top of the journalism rating as a very good journalist. Stick to the truth. Use the best protection you have. If you do get sued, well, you're pretty much on your own.
Yeah,
You're
yeah.
you're on your own. And are you going to, will there be a freezing effect? Will there be a self-censoring effect because someone is afraid that they're going to get sued? Maybe I won't do that story, or maybe I'll pull back on that story. I don't know. It depends on the individual. But if they're telling the truth, that's still the only defense that they can have.
But earlier you mentioned AI, and Jen and I have been talking about that this whole season. How do you
Mm.
see AI changing newsrooms day to day? Like, do you see
Mm.
it being able to assist in terms of acting as an editor? Could it help make
Mm.
rundowns? Could it help decide what
Mm.
stories are trending?
Yeah.
What do you see it as?
Yes,
Yeah,
yes, it
so
can.
it's
Yeah.
yeah, it's already happening. It's already I started. I would say it penetrated newsrooms in a very significant way in 2017 when
Really?
Bloomberg started having AI to assist with his business reports, and the BBC about that time had AI writing local elections in certain parts of the country and sending those election results in. Um, the AP, about the same time, 2017, had AI reporting, doing all of the minor league baseball stories. Were done by AI in 2017. So that was basic research, ground
Hmm.
level research, for what they knew it would be able to do. The technology is in place now to where AI can do play by play of a football game with the assistance of 5G. I mean, that's quite imaginable because you have RF attached to the ball. I'll keep it simple, attached to the ball, to the jersey, and you have the 5G sending it to Siri's voice, and Siri says, Donna, who knows? Henry just ran 15 yards up the field. Siri's voice says that. She gets the information from what's on the field. All that technology is in place. In terms of writing a rundown, doing a rundown, imagine talking to ChatGPT and say, ChatGPT, of all of the stories that are happening right now on the AP Information Newswire, I only want the ones that have to do with high school sports in the northern part of the district. And I would like those to be in the middle of a news rundown. Please, thank you very much. And also, while you're at it, could you find corresponding video attached to that? That technology is in place. So you follow the technology. And if you own a business, and you want to save money, you're definitely going to follow the technology. So you can do that. Can I save on paying an anchor, let's say a medium-sized TV station, 120,000, maybe $200,000 a year for my top-notch anchor? Well, I can probably get it for free. And I can have an AI, you can have an AI generated anchor. And people were going to say, that's not real. That's not real. But when you look at the graphics and the weather today, that's not real. Those graphics, those aren't real clouds. But you get used to it, and you will get
Hmm.
used to an animated anchor giving you the news, but it better be telling me the truth. Oh, it's telling me
Hmm.
the truth. I found that out yesterday, and it's telling me the truth. It's true today. So tomorrow it's going to be true. And you know what? I'm getting used to it. So the newsrooms, they will change because the technology has already dictated they will change. And journalists have to make the adjustments. How are they going to change to the technology? Because the corporations are going to save money and they're going to make money at the same time. They're going to make money, they'll save money off of firing you or giving you less and giving the AI more. The strange thing about it, AI is supposed to make the cost of everything go down.
Hmm.
It will. But the people who profit from that cost going down, it won't be any individual. It's going to be the people that own the companies that are using the AI.
That was sobering.
Hmm.
No, be optimistic. I think this is the most exciting time to be in journalism because our creativity is going to save us. How are we going to use the technology to continue to tell the truth? Well, at the same time, that very technology is encouraging you to lie and to exaggerate. But but we want to tell the truth. We know that it's important that the society be informed, that our neighborhood be informed, that our state be informed. That's what we want to do. And the technology can help us do that and be happy about it and can help us do it on a micro level. And people should be excited. It's like I tell a story about Ben Franklin. Ben Franklin, I call him the original blogger, even though there was a blogger back then, blogging back then, but he was basically a blogger, and he was writing up his own. Was I can't remember the
Poor
name of
Richard's
it.
Almanac.
Yeah, right. So his brother, that was his brother's
Oh, I know
outlet,
that.
and his brother James was actually put in jail because of what he was writing. He told Ben Franklin, he said, "You take this over before we try to get out of jail." Ben Franklin took it over and did a better job than his brother. But he was like the original blogger. If he had the internet back then, he would have been monster. But everyone, we have to think of ourselves as being that type of person. It's your one-man shop, and then how can you expand it out? But you have to tell the truth. That's how you're going to get the stickiness. In other words, people coming back. That's how you're going to get people to like you. And that's how you'll be able to get money through ads, through advertising. That's how you'll be able to feed your family, be able to feed a couple of families, maybe three, four families, if you stick to what is true and reliable.
Wow. Well, Ben, thank you so much for all of this. This has been really so fascinating. And we have a question we ask everyone at the end of our show is,
Hmm.
why did you become a journalist?
Why? I didn't have a choice. First of all, it was inculcated into my brain when I was a kid. Um, how can I say this? My parents didn't want us yapping during the news, which they had to watch. So to keep us from talking during the news, they said, "I want you to tell us what that man said when the commercial comes on." So we had to focus and listen to what they were saying. And then when the commercial came on, we had to tell our parents, "Well, he said this, this, and that." So I was already listening to news by force at a young age. And so I loved it. I always watched it. And I got to Washington, D.C. after college. And I planned to go to the State Department and work in the Foreign Service after I got a law degree, all of those lofty things. And to support myself, I did temporary jobs. I got one temporary job at a place called, at the time, we're called NPR, National Public Radio. And I walked in there and I saw all of these reporters walking around and these things they called wire machines, which spitted out pieces of paper with news on them. I saw those things. I said, "Oh man," I said, "this is where I want to be." And I got a job answering their telephones. And it was very exciting to answer the telephones for 14 reporters. And they liked me. And eventually they would send me out to help them on stories. Sometimes they would send me out by myself to the Pentagon, the White House, the State Department. And it was the most exciting job I've ever had in journalism. I love it. But that's how I got started, answering telephones at NPR at the time. And
Mm.
it was just wonderful. It's like, when you play sports and you're in the zone and you always want to get
Yes.
Hmm.
that feeling again, you want to get back into the zone. Well, my job as a receptionist at NPR was my zone. And whenever I want to feel good about my career, myself, journalism, I think about that zone I was in. It was such a beautiful place. And all the reporters, they were very supportive of me. I'm African American male, and I'm intelligent and smart, and it didn't work against me because some places it can work against you.
Yeah.
But that's a place where they just said, "Oh, Ben, come here. We want to fertilize what you are. We want it to grow." That's what NPR was like. So it was a great experience. I had bad experiences there as well. But overall, it was a fantastic experience. And that's how I got started in journalism. And that stamp Working around all of those correspondents left an impression on me on what journalism is supposed to be, what a journalist is supposed to do. And you report things and let the chips fall where they may. The reporters the correspondents that I admired, someone like Cokie Roberts, who ended up being like a mother to me. Um, they were like, they had the wherewithal to say, we're going to report this story. No one can touch us. We're telling the truth. No
Wow.
one can touch us.
Mm.
Nina Totenberg, who's still around. This is
Hmm.
the truth. We're going to report this story. No one can touch us. I don't know
Hmm.
how many times Nina has been attacked because people didn't like her stories, but they couldn't touch her because she was telling the truth. So
Mm.
that's the type of environment that I was introduced to.
That's
Did I
Wow.
answer your question?
Yes,
Yeah,
Is that
no,
you
okay?
did. You did.
absolutely. Yes.
Thank you,
And
Professor Davis. Thank
Okay.
you for that. Seriously.
You're welcome.
exactly. I
Right.
was going to say, I mean, Ben, Professor Davis, this has been a great conversation.
Hmm.
And yeah, I think uplifting. This is actually a
Hmm.
very exciting time to be a journalist. Hella
Yes,
frustrating,
please. Yeah, a little
scary,
frustrating.
Yeah.
but change usually is scary. So thank you so much for giving us something to believe in. And by all means, let us know when that app drops.
I will. In December, we should be making it live, and I will let you know for
Sweet.
sure.
Can't wait.
Thank you
Okay.
so much for joining
Yeah.
us.
Thank you.
All right.
You're welcome. Bye-bye.
Bye. Laid Off and Looking is an independent podcast conceived of and created by Jenna Flanagan and Dominic Camia.
Music provided by Jake Howitt. Research by Lori Rothenbucker.
You can watch and follow us on YouTube.
Or you can listen and follow us wherever you get your podcasts.
And if you have any questions or suggestions, we want to hear from you. So leave a comment.
We do check them.
Or reach out to us anytime at laidoffandlookingpod@gmail.com.
New episodes every Friday.